Hey guys, new expansion is coming out in less than a week, and I wanted a lot of the cards have already been released. All the cards will be released by Wednesday. I wanted to go through the cards and talk about my opinions on the cards, give them a rating 1 through 5, but also just talk about what I think about them and what I think each card will be good. I'm going to rate cards at 1 through 5 on just power level, like sort of the raw power level. So like a card that's a 1 mana 5/5 would be an insane power level. 5 would not even be on the scale, but it's not really. But there's also a deck building, so the sort of ability to synergize it with other cards, because 1 mana 5/5 is just a great card, but it's not really synergistically interesting. Where some other card, like a 1 mana 5/5, that when you have 10, 20 death rattles in your deck, that's not that good in most decks. But once you have the 20 death rattles in your deck, it's insanely good. So if you have a deck that already does that, that's like a high deck building card. That shows synergy and it shows creativity. So I'm going to kind of more say like deck building potential and sort of the raw power level of cards. So I'm going to go with this card. I'm going off the Play Hearthstone website. This is Wretched Tutor, and this is a neutral common. And I don't know if you guys know the spell burst. This is when you play a spell, how strong it is. It does this effect one time. So if you play it, it's on the board, and then you wait 3 turns, and then you finally do the spell, and then it no longer has that effect. So this first one is the Wretched Tutor. Spell damage is deal 2 to all their minions. And on the surface, it seems, oh, this is pretty good. But I like, comparing this to a card like Crazy Netherwing. And don't get me wrong, Crazy Netherwing is a really good card. But this does not seem, this is sort of a little understated. 4 mana 3/6 would be the normal thing. You have to do a spell. So if you don't have a cheap spell, it's not that good. So I don't think this card is that strong. If a deck already has all this spellburst synergy, it's going to be, let's say there's just a huge meta of lots of 2 mana minions. I could see this card being put in, but I don't think it's that great. So I'm going to give this card a 2 out of 5, but a 3 on deck building potential. Wand Thief, combo discover a mage spell. And this is the new class thing of being able to look at being multiple class. And this card's a mage and rogue card. Discover spell. This card I think is quite strong, though it's still a combo, so it does have the compromise of it's a 1-drop, but it's not good as a 1-drop for these discover effects. So as a 1/2, it's not as good, but I think it's still quite good. So, but I don't think it's hyper strong. It's got some nice synergy, but it's kind of just this with if you're running a lot of combo stuff or small stuff, and it seems like there's a lot of stuff in this expansion that rewards lots of little small things with things like spell burst. So I'm going to give this 3 on power level and a 3 on deck building. Vectus. Battle Cry, summon 2 1/1 whelps. Each gains a death rattle from your minions that die this game. I'm a big fan of this card. I think it's just a really cool card, and I really like it. I'm going to be trying out decks day 1 that run this. You could do eggs. You could do stuff. You could put this in a face hunter, that runs the 2 mana 2/1s that deal 3 damage to your opponent to be more face damage. You could do it with things like Terran. So I'm a big fan of this card. I think even just as a 5 mana summon 2 1/1s, that's not bad. Like that's very strong to begin with, because it's just 5 mana 4/4 with 2 1/1s. So even if it didn't have the death rattle, it's not a bad card. But with the death rattle, so I'm gonna give this a 4 on power and a 5 on deck building. So the right synergy, this card could be insane, but I could see this card just being okay. Because of it is dependent on synergies to be insane. It's not just objectively powerful. So without the right death rattles, but I'm a big fan of this card. This is a card I'm going to be trying day 1. So this card's really cool, and yeah, big fan. Transfer Student. So this has different effect based on which board you're on. You've already probably played this card. This card seems solid. It seems it's a nice 2-drop that you can slot into a lot of decks where it needs a 2-drop. So I've already played it. I think you guys can agree. I think it's about a 3 in power level. It's good. It's going to slot into a good amount of decks that need a 2-drop. But I'm not a fan of this as a deck builder. You can't synergize with this because it does everything. So you can't say, oh, I really want this specific effect. So I'm going to give this a 1 on deck building. I think a really top deck will cut this deck. And I think this is going to fit more into things like Highlander Hunter, the Highlander decks that just need 30 cards that are just relatively strong so it can get the Zephyr package. So I think this is... I'm not a fan of this card as a deck builder, but it's a good card. So... And it is interesting, so but yeah. Anyways, next card's Steel Dancer. Summon a random minion with equal cost to your weapon's attack. I don't think this card is hard to pull off. Cards that really use your weapon's attack have historically not been that great, but if you always had a weapon, in theory, okay, 4 mana, if you just, let's say you have a Livewire Lance, it's a 4 mana card that summons a 2-drop. That's not even that great, because if you get a good one, it's good. And 4 mana often tends to be an awkward slot. So I think this is. But that being said, if you did have a deck that just ran lots of weapons, I could see it being a thing. I'm gonna give this a 3 on deck building and a 2 on power level. Sphere of Sapience. This is a really cool card. At the start of your turn, look at your top card. You can put it on the bottom and lose 1 durability. People were saying in my stream that this card is insane. I think people are overestimating this card, largely because it costs card value. So think of the thing of where you play a card like people saying, oh, it's a tracking 4 times, and it's not that. One is you either choose this or random card, where tracking is you get to just look at 3 different cards. So you don't get to look and say, okay, I could look at a card, but I don't like this card, but I want to see the other card. You don't get to choose. You just get to say, okay, I don't want this card. Second of all, it's by playing this card, you have 1 less card in your hand. This is the same problem that quest decks run into, where, all right, if I play this card, I don't get to use it in something else. So that's a big negative. So I think certain card decks that really, maybe need to not draw something, it's a really interesting card. So I'm giving this card maybe you use it to just increase the likelihood, and maybe you already draw a lot of cards, but you just want to not draw bad cards. There's an interesting potential. So I'm going to give this a 4 for deck building, but a 2 for power level. I don't think it's actually that good, but it's a really interesting card. So I can't give it a bad deck building rating. Raz Frost Whisperer. At the end of your turn, deal 1 damage to all enemies. This is a mage and shaman card, improved by spell damage. This card is insanely strong. Compare this to Dragon Maw Scorcher. Battle card, deal 1 damage to all enemies, not all enemy minions, which saw play. And cards like Dreadlord, which was a class card in Warlock. This is 2 classes. This card's, even if you just take away the improved by spell damage, this card's still good. This card goes face. Deal damage to all enemies. So this card's insanely good. Even without the synergy, like I said, if you're not running any spell damage cards, you would still probably want to run this card. You add spell damage in, this card becomes insane. So this card, I think it's a 5 on power level, and it's a 4 on deck building. I think there's stuff to do with spell damage, but are you really gonna do you really are going to build a whole deck around this card? Probably not. Maybe if you have a spell damage turn to be good, but the reality is you don't need this card to have like a crazy amount of spell damage. You could just use it as is, but you also could use this with some other cards to do some really cool stuff. So this card's incredibly strong. I could see this card getting nerfed. This card's very good. Pen Flinger. Deal 1 damage, spell burst, return this to your hand. It's like Elven Archer, but it returns to your hand. I think this card's really bad, but it's interesting. People are trying to find weird OTKs with it, weird things to do. So I think it does. If you're looking for these crazy combos, somebody might come up with a crazy combo to this deck. I was thinking things like you use it with the 3 mana 3/4 for Warlock that allows you to heal or to get more mana whenever you do damage. You could do it and then use some mana that you get from that. So there are weird, crazy combos you could do, especially if you have ridiculous amounts of life. So it's an interesting card. I'm going to give it a 1 on power level, but I'm going to give it a 3 on deck building. It's a really interesting card. And that's, like I said, one of the things I really like about this expansion. There's so much potential for creative stuff. Onk's Mage Scribe. Spellburst, add 2 cards from your class to your hand. So people thinking, oh, this is 2 random spells. But the reality is I don't think this is that strong. But it is a very good stat line. 6 mana, 4/9. That's very efficient. So I think a lot of times, I remember from Descent of Dragons, a lot of the dragons were just not really that strong and weren't that used until lots of things got nerfed. The reality is, if this had taunt, this would be insanely good, but it doesn't. So the reality is, okay, like, how much value do I really need? The 6 mana 4/9 doesn't really do much. So what kind of deck am I running this in? It's random spells, so I'm not convinced this card is going to be good, and it's not really good synergistically. So I'm going to give this a 1 on both deck building and power level. I don't think it's very strong. Lore Keeper Pulked. Reorder your deck from the highest card to the lowest card. This card is really cool, just because it allows you to draw the top end of your deck. So it's you could use it in a deck that even runs only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 drops, and you could just put it in, and then you play it, and then all of a sudden you only draw your big thing, so you stop curving out bad stuff. So then you don't even need a lot of card draw. It is a good stat line, but I also think in certain decks, like do I really want to play this on 4 with a deck that runs a 9 drop like Dragon Queen Alexstrasza, like in the Highlander deck? No. So it's hard to. There's negatives to this card too. It's really hard to play it on curve in a lot of decks unless you're this. But there's really cool ideas that you can do with it. You could run it in Questlock, play it, and then guarantee your hero power hits Dragon Queen Alexstrasza or Malygos or something like that. So I think this card's really cool, but I'm not convinced of the power level actually being that strong. So I'm going to give it a 2.5 on power level. I can't quite feel like I give it a 3, but I'm going to give it a 5 on deck building because it's just really cool potential of, it's a whole, so somebody might come with something really cool and maybe it'll be good. So it's definitely a card to look out and try and think of things. Keymaster Alabaster. Whenever your opponent draws a card, add a copy to your hand that costs 1. This card seems, in the right deck, it's a very powerful effect. 7 mana, 6/8, add a copy. If you just said add a random card from your opponent's deck, it costs 1. That would be, as a battle card, that would be pretty decent. But it's when it draws a card, so this could get more than 1 card. So it's a little awkward where, what deck am I going to play this in? I feel this could go in a very sort of greedy value control deck, and you can stick it, and it can work off in a way similar to Katrina. But like Katrina doesn't seem to play in a lot of decks other than res decks. I'm not convinced this card is going to see that much play, just because it has to work in the right deck, and it's not really like, are you going to build a win condition around stealing a 1 mana cost card? Probably not. So while I think this card's really cool, it doesn't really have that much deck building synergy. It's your opponent's deck, and stealing a 1 mana card doesn't seem that strong. Or doesn't seem, it's strong, but it's, if your opponent's playing an aggressive deck, you don't really want this. But in a very heavy value deck, this could definitely be useful for generating more value. So I think I'm going to give this card a 2.5 on power level, but I'm going to give it a 1.5 on synergy. You don't really put this in for synergy. You just kind of slop it in a deck that needs a little more value and wants to steal value from their opponent. So really cool card, but I'm not actually convinced it'll be that good. Jandis Barov. Battle Cry, summon 2 random 5 cost minions, secretly pick one that dies when it takes damage. This card's really cool. This it's just like it'll be really interesting game theory because might be like, oh, this card's always the best card to remove, but then you're like, well, if I know my opponent knows that, they're going to kill that one. So you're going to have some interesting game theory situations that your opponent's going to have to deal with. So I think it's a really cool card, but even the stat line, the fact that even if it only takes 1 hit, this could be really efficient. Especially, I'm not exactly sure how strong 5 drops are. Hopefully, I don't think it can do Jandis Barov, but if it does, that makes it a lot worse because it is a 5 mana 2/1. But I think this card is really interesting, and it's pretty strong because so I'm gonna give it, but it's not. I don't. We'll have to see how strong it is, but I could definitely see it just being slot, especially into a lot of mage decks. Seeing it slot into something like Highlander Mage, just to be a high tempo card. A 5-drop, a 2/1, and a 5-drop that dies very easily. So very high tempo. I'm gonna give this a 3 stars. But it's not. I don't see the synergy with other cards, so I'm gonna give this a 2 on deck building. Not really that interesting on deck building, but just it's a cool card nonetheless. Headmaster Kel'Thuzad. If the spell destroys any minion, summon them. This card, people, is really cool card. You can do it with the dream is you do it with Brawl and Headmaster Kel'Thuzad survives. It has to survive to work, but then you would summon all the minions destroyed from the Brawl, including your own. So really some really cool potential. You know, you could do something like if you could stick it with a Flame Strike, you know, kill your opponent's entire board, or just something, you know, like play this in Rolling Firewall. You could play this in Priest with just play it in Shadow or Death, and it's like a mind control. So this card's I could definitely see it in a lot of decks. I don't think it's hyper strong. I don't think it's a 5, but I'm gonna give this. But it does offer interesting synergies, and it does and it is quite strong. So I'm gonna give this a 4 on both power level and deck building sort of synergistic potential. Dr. Krasinov, rush whenever this attacks, give your weapon +1/+1. This card is really good. And when I look at it, compared to Captain Greenskin, which is a 5 mana 5/4 that does this, but it doesn't have rush and can only do it once. So this card, if it survives, it could do it multiple times. So if Greenskin's being run, I would rather run this in any deck, unless I'm intentionally trying to get the pirate synergy from Ankar. I would rather run this than Captain Greenskin. I'd rather have a 4/4 rush, where a 5/4 dies to Shadow or Death, but it's just kind of awkward on board. That's often the problem with Greenskin. So this card I think is really good in that way. So I'm going to give this card, since Greenskin, I think Greenskin's good, but it's very dependent on the synergy. I'm going to give this both a 3.5 on power level and a 4 on synergy. It's kind of allows you to do some really cool stuff with weapon decks in the rogue and warrior class. Just a pretty strong card and some definite strong deck building synergy potential to build with it. Devolving Missiles. Shoot 3 random missiles at random enemies that transform them into ones that cost 1 less. I think this card is very strong. Think about Devolve that used to be run in Shaman and how useful it was. It's a 1 mana hex. It can do it on 3 random enemy minions, so it could do it on 3 different ones. So you could be kind of having a hex-like effect. If there are a lot of Death Rattle cards, it's could be really good. I consider it more of a tech option. I'm not sure it's strong enough that it's going to be just being used in every random deck, because certain cards might be used even if there isn't a lot of Death Rattle synergy. But I'm going to give this a 3 on power level. It seems more like a tech card to the right meta, but I'm going to give it a sort of a 1.5 on deck building. there might be some cool stuff you can do with it, but for the most part, it's kind of a thing of like, okay, the meta, I need to beat this deck. This deck is running a lot of death rattles or things, so I'm going to devolve it with the missile. So seems like a really cool, a kind of card that's reminiscent of the old devolve. Uh, but I'm not sure if it's going to be like, don't think it's going to be super, super strong and just slot into every mage and shaman deck. Cult, Neophyte, Battle Cry. Your opponent's spells cost 1 more next turn. I don't think this card's very good. I don't think it's going to see play as a tech card, and it's not. I don't see it. If you look compared to things like the old Boom Pistol Bully, or I'm blanking on the name, but I don't think it's that strong. I'm gonna give this card a 1 on power level and a 1 on deck building potential. Troublemaker. At the end of your turn, summon 2 3/3 ruffians that attack random enemies. This card seems really good. You consider it just the fact that it's summoning 2 3/3, so it can immediately go 6 face. It just in a heavy value deck, it seems like it'd be real nice. That being said, it seems way too greedy to be slot in a lot of decks. I don't think I'd be running this in something like Egg Warrior, but I could see in so if you remember the old in the Extreme Bomb Warrior meta, people in Specialists would run really greedy stuff so they could beat other greedy decks. So if you get a greed meta, this card would be insanely good. Just the fact you can plop it down, it does some damage, and if it's not removed immediately, just a very powerful threat. Very spiraling, so it's just kind of one of those cards that, like Katrina, that has an immediate effect. It's very unlike Katrina, where Katrina, if you don't have good minions, it can suck. But this card is always 3/3, and they always attack. So it could have issues with board space, but overall, I think this card is very strong. So I'm gonna give it, but only would fit in the right deck. So I don't think it's an auto slot or anything like that. So I'm gonna give this a 3.5 on power level and a 2.5 on deck building. Rattlegore. Death Rattle, resummon this with -1/-1. And people love this, are talking about this card. This card's really interesting. It's very similar to this card. Looks like it works in a really greedy control warrior deck. And in the right meta, if there's not a lot of silence, you could plop this card down and this card could just win the game. That being said, I kind of feel like this card feels a similar feel to Octosari. And in the current meta, I feel like Octosari, just doesn't work. And while this card is not drawing you cards, instead it's making just minion after minion. I don't think in the most situations it's going to be that strong. But, in the right deck, if you could make a really greedy deck, I think it could be really cool. So I don't think this card is actually that strong. I don't, it's a 9 mana. 9 mana cards are hard to do. If you look at like a 10 mana King Pharaohs, that gives you a whole board. With this in a long game where your opponent doesn't have silences, yeah, it could be great. So, but even if you're playing against a priest, they might not have a silence, but they might go Soul Mirror. Now they have it too, and then all of a sudden, if you're playing something like I'm playing Q Priest, I might go Grave Runes, and now I've stolen all your Rattlegores. But if I'm Demon Hunter, okay, when are you going to plop this down? This is going to be a dead card. So I don't think this card's actually that strong, but I think it's really cool. And I think in the right deck, it could be really in the right meta. So I'm going to give this a 3 on deck building, but I'm only going to give this a 2 on power level. I just don't think it's as strong as people are hyping it up to be. But in the right meta, like I said, it could be insane. So in a very greedy, heavy warrior meta. So Playmaker, after you play Rush Minion, summon a copy with 1 health remaining. Like this card, with other Rush Minions could be really good. Play this with Restless Mummy, play this with Kargoth. It's real nice, but it's kind of awkward playing both of those. Same reason, it's often like hard to get a good Bloodsworn play. So I don't think this is that strong, but it is a good stat line. It's going to be hard to stick on the board. I think I saw Bloody Face saying I would evaluate this card very differently for a 3/4 versus a 4/3, because it doesn't really need to put pressure on itself. It more wants to survive to to play a 4-drop on 4. So because three attack things are a lot easier to kill than 4 health things. Dies Dependence, there's Smite, there's a lot of things that deal 3 damage. So it's going to be a lot easier to kill. So, but it's really cool. It's got some good deck building potential. So I'm gonna give this a 2 on power level, but a 3 on deck building potential. It could definitely with the right rush minions I could see it being a thing. So Void Drinker. Now, before we go over this, we should probably go into here's the Soul Fragment cards. So if you look at this one, summon 2 Soul Fragments, and if you look at Soul Fragments, I believe they're these fragments that are in your deck they're cast when drawn, heal 2, but you can use them if they're still in your deck. So this card, you see the Spirit Jailer, and this card I think is because I'm going to give a 4 on deck building, but a 3 on power level. 1 mana 1/3s are always decent, but it has the synergy of the Soul Fragment stuff. So you can use it if you have this and you play this Void Drinker. Destroy a Soul Fragment in your deck, gain +3/+3. People are kind of looking at the medium roll potential of, okay, when I hit the Soul Fragment, it's really good. But I think people are overestimating, like, oh, I'm always going to have a Soul Fragment. And the reality is you're not. Sometimes you're just not going to hit the Soul Fragment, or you're going to draw them before and you're like, oh, I didn't get it, or I just drew it, and then all of a sudden you don't get that +3/+3. So obviously, like a 5 mana 7/8 taunt is very strong. You remember the 4 mana 8/8 that when you're at 15 health or less from old Even Warlock saw a lot of play. So that was a good card in that situation. So this card I think is not as like objectively strong as people are saying, but in the right deck it could be really good. So I'm gonna give this a 3.5 on deck building and a 2.5 on power level. And this card, like I said, a 4 on deck building and a 3 on power level. This whole Soul Fragment stuff is really cool stuff. The order is a little weird. So Shano do Wild Claw. Give your beast in your deck +1/+1, or transfer a copy into friendly beast. I think this reminds me of old Talaran. If you had a heavy beast deck, this could be really good. Just like you do it with something like Pharaoh Cat, or the Pharaoh Cat, the giant cat set that the Pharaoh Cat gives the 6/8. I'm blanking on the name. I can copy it and get another one. So I think this card's got some. It's reasonably strong. I'm gonna give it a 3.5 on strength and a 4 on deck building potential. If you have a beast deck or this, it could do cards that copy, and if you have a ton of beasts, could be really good. So definitely a lot of potential there. Nature Studies. Discover a spell, your next one costs 1 less. This card's very strong. Discover, if you look at Renew, or things like Primordial Glyph from the old Mage card, this reminds me of that. Discovering a spell tends to be really nice, and you have the synergy with things like Exotic Mount Seller. And so just being able to do that can be really useful. Already things like the Discover, choose 1 minion, get see play, and quests in old Quest Druid. But I feel that this card could be slotted in to just any amount of decks. I think this is Druid decks that run spells, because just having the flexibility and without losing tempo can be really good. So I'm going to give this card a 5 on power level. I think it's going to be used in a lot of decks. I'm going to give it a 4 on deck building. There's definitely potential to go off on combo or Druid decks that use a lot of spells. So really good card. I think it'll see a lot of play in a lot of Druid decks. Diligent Note Taker. Spell Burst, return this spell to your hand. This spell to your hand. And this card is really good because you can just get 2 uses out of spells. And people are looking at the synergy with the 0 mana, well, we're going to get to later, the 0 mana card that generates you 2 mana. It's like the old Innervate, but with Overload. And you play this, and you do double Innervate, and you play stuff, and they're saying, oh, this card. So this card's really cool synergistically, but I think the Spell Burst is solid, but I think people are saying it's not as hyper strong as people are giving credit for, but it's a lot of really good deck building potential. So I'm gonna give this a 4 on deck building potential and a 3 on power level. Definitely a good card, good stat line, but I don't think it's hyper broken or anything. But there's definitely some good potential there. Goody Two Shoes, Divine Shield, Spell Burst, gain Divine Shield. This card's very strong, just a 3 mana 4. If you look at the 3 mana 3/1, there's a 3 mana 3/1 Divine Shield card that's compared to that card's a decent arena card. Like it's this. This is 4 mana 4/2 Divine Shield, which is already insanely good as own, and the fact that you can get another one. So this card's incredibly strong. I'm going to give this a 4.5 on power level, just because it's just such a strong. Like I feel like every Paladin deck that isn't just like all Murlocs will be running it. But I think the spell burst isn't as synergistically. So there is some like, okay, I need to make sure I'm playing spells. But even I could see a deck that doesn't run spells but still want to have this card. So I'm gonna give it a 4.5 on power level, but a 3 on deck building. Don't think this is I'm not sure if this is enough to carry the Paladin class, but definitely a very strong card. Very strong 3-drop. It's going to be slotted into a lot of Paladin decks. Lightning Bloom. So this is the card everyone was talking about and saying this card is so good. I don't think this card, I think if it is as good as people say. So people think, oh yeah, I can get a bunch of advantage turn, but you're paying for that the next turn. So yeah, if you're doing it on a turn and you're sort of early, that you're overloading so much that you just pass the next turn, yeah, that could be great. But you look at things like the old Edwin, like you're often doing the same thing to get +2/+2 on your Edwin, similar kind of thing. But then you're using all your value. And then if someone just had a Shadow or Death, that's the old Edwin, the original before sort of lackeys and Shadow Step on, your Ethereal Lacquey became a thing. You're using a lot of value for that Edwin. So I remember, the old, with the prep, people would make a giant Edwin on turn 2 or something, a 12/12, and they'd have one card. And if you had Shadow or Death, you won. And if you didn't, you lost. This card, I think, people are massively overrating. Old Innervate just had this effect, but it wasn't overloaded. Think about that. Like, this used to be a card without overload. And so unless you have really good overload synergy, so like the cards, like people are thinking you could do it with this. So if you get this on board and then you could do a double one, there's some really cool potential. So I think this has, that being said, this has really cool combo potential. So this offers a lot of really interesting deck building. It's interesting as this. So I don't think this card is that strong, but it's really interesting for deck building. So and it offers a lot of potential. So maybe somebody can figure out a way to break the game with this card. I don't think so, but I think it's definitely possible. So I'm going to give this a 4 on deck building, but a 2 on power level. I think people are way overestimating how strong this card is, but it does offer a lot of really cool potential for synergy, for doing combos, stuff like that. So let's not count out this card, but I don't think this card is just going to be slotted into every deck. Like the value cost and the overload cost matter a lot more than people are giving credit for. So first day of school. Add 2 random 1 minion cards to your hand. This card's cool at first. So add 2 random 1-cost minions, but I kind of think of the old Jar Dealer and stuff like the old 3 mana 2/1 that was the Acorn Dealer. No, not that. But there was a card Raven Dealer that added 2 1-cost minions to your hand. And that wasn't that good, but you can do this on turn 1 and get a 1-drop immediately, and then choose between 2. So I think it's more as like it has synergy with things like the Spell Burst, so the fact that it's 0 mana. So I think this is not that strong of a card on its own, but it has some interesting deck building potential. So I'm going to give it a 3.5 on deck building, but I'm going to give it a 1.5 on power level. I just don't think it's that good, strong. So I don't think I would play this card on my own. I think there's too many bad 1-drops that you don't want to get. So you'd rather just be running good 1-drops in your deck. Frazzled Freshman. 1 mana 1/4. People think a 1 mana 1/4. This has never been seen before. And that's true. But I think people are underestimating. Like Blizzard can make this card because of the design space of Current Priest. And the Current Priest has lots of really efficient cards. Things like Shadow or Death, or things even like the Grave Runes thing on my Q Priest, where it's really efficient. But the reality is, Priest runs out of value fast. So this is the kind of thing like, okay, this is very strong one drop, but it just costs value. So I think this card is, saying it's in the right deck, it's not as easy to make work. So as if this card were neutral, this card would be a 5-star card, just because it's overstated than anything. Every deck would be running it. But realistically, I think it's because it's Priest, and Priest is not wanting to run one drops that don't. Right now it's usually running Disciple, but Q Priest does run the 2/5 card that Imprison Homunculus. So I could see this card, replacing that in Q Priest. You play this and you coin Apotheosis. Certainly, a 3-mana 3/7 on turn 2 is incredibly strong. So this card is definitely good. I'm going to give it a 3.5 on power level and a 3 on deck building potential. There's some definitely tempo Priest options that might curve out real fast potential. So it's definitely a good card. But remember, Priest has difficulty closing out games aggressively, and the reality is Priest runs out of value fast. So this is not as strong as it would be in another class. Like you put this in Demon Hunter, put this in Hunter, 5-star card. So, but I think it's a 3.5 in Priest. So Combustion, deal 4 damage to a minion. Any excess deals it to both neighbors. Definite, cool card. It's I could see often decks are looking for 3-mana plays, so it might be nice to have a 3-mana play to remove stuff. Could effectively deal with an early board. Someone has a 2-mana minion, but it also has a lot of room if it does become meta for people to play around it. So play your big minion in a bit. So I think this card's is okay. I'm not convinced it's that strong. But I could see it seeing play. I'm only going to give it a 2 on power level. And it has some spell damage synergy potential, so I'm going to give it a 2 on deck building. Not that I don't think it's that great, but it is kind of it could be maybe in the right meta where there's lots of maybe 2 health minions. This could be quite good. So, but I do worry that often a lot of minions are 3 health. So unless they have a 1 health minion in between or something like that, often you'd rather have just like a 2-mana spell that removes things. Infiltrator Leon. Stealth Death Rattle, summon a 4/2 Forsaken Leon that attacks a random enemy. This is kind of reminds me a lot of Reborn stuff, but it does have stealth. I always wanted to kind of make the 5-mana the Assassin 5-mana 4/2, but it was always just a little too slow with the Reborn, and this feels really similar to that, but 4 mana. So I think the going down to 4 mana and the immediate attack in an aggressive rogue deck could be incredibly strong. Not being able to remove it, they kill it, immediately attacks an enemy. You could trade it like into a minion on the end. So it definitely has some. I think it's pretty solid. I'm not convinced it's hyper strong, but I think I'm not convinced every rogue deck will run it, but I think it's pretty good. So I think it's a 3.5 both on deck building and power level. Definitely some synergy stuff you could do with controlling the board and immediately getting that damage to get being able to trade it into something. So there's a kind of building your deck to get that effect potential. Cycle of Hatred. So this is goes with the. This is a Demon Hunter card. Deals 3 damage to all minions. Summon a 3/3 spirit for every minion killed. This card is obviously on the right board is insane, but will it be? What kind of Demon Hunter deck will run it? I'm not sure. Like Demon Hunter playing control. Most Demon Hunter decks currently that play control and value don't want to do this, but like want to be fighting for board. They're usually like right now you have control Demon Hunter that usually just does all weapon stun and hit fates. But in theory, this card could be really good. But in practice, it's a 7-mana card that clears. It almost seems like you'd have more. So I don't actually think this card's that good. The more I think about it. But it definitely has some cool potential. So I'm going to give it a 1.5 on power level. but I don't think it's. But it does have some deck building potential. If you have like a board, so the fact that you could maybe do a bunch of trades and then do that and then make a whole new board. So maybe in the right deck, I'd be interested. I'm gonna give it 2.5 on deck building potential. So. Brittle Bone Destroyer. If your hero's health change this turn, destroy a minion. So for 6 mana, you can always destroy a minion. Very reminiscent of Vilespine while developing. This card's very strong and does offer some really good deck building potential. I think it's stronger in Warlock because Priest often, like if you're playing defensive, you might have full health. But I guess if your opponent's, it probably works better in a defensive Priest because your life total is getting lowered than in a sort of tempo-y Priest that's more offensive. But it's definitely a very strong card. I think I could see it being auto-include in lots of different types of Warlock decks and maybe even Priest decks too. So I'm going to give this both a 4 on power level, and because of the hero power, there's cool things you can do with that. So it's a 4 on deck building as well. Bone Web, Egg, Death Rattle, summon 2/1 spiders. If you discard this, triggers Death Rattle. On the surface, doesn't seem that good, but I think I love the eggs, and I think eggs and Death Rattles offer huge potential. So I already think you could just run this just as another egg in like an egg Warlock. You run Terran, you maybe run the 5 mana card we talked about earlier. I'm blanking on the name. But so this card has a lot of potential for deck building. Even has discard. I feel like you didn't even have to put this card. So I think this card's quite strong. But I also could see in the right deck. But so I'm gonna give it a 3 on power level. But I'm gonna give it a 4.5 on deck building. Just a lot of potential for Death Rattle stuff to put it in, or even the discard. So a lot of potential to make this a really interesting card in a lot of decks. So Warlock decks. So. Disciplinarian Gangling. After you play a minion, destroy it. Summon a 4/4 failed student. This card, in the right deck, with things like Death Rattle synergies, could be insane. You could play it, or you could just play a 1-mana minion. So this seems like it works a lot better off the top of my head in Warlock. You can make things like lackeys into 4/4 failed students. You could do it with Death Rattles. Like I play this and I play a Serpent Egg. So lots of potential for deck building. Lots of potential with this card. I love this card. And I think he's very strong. At a 4-mana 3/6, you could play it, and it's often not going to get removed. And it's 4-mana 3/6s. If you're especially an aggressive deck that's generally fighting for board, it's often tough. Unless you're playing Priest and they run Shadow or Pain to remove. So I'm going to give this card a 4 on power level and a 4 on deck building. Lots of really interesting Death Rattle synergies and stuff you can do with this deck card. Flesh Giant. Costs 1 less for each time your hero's health change this turn or during your turn. So it's kind of like one of the Giants where the more times with Warlock, you do 4 hero powers. You could make it a 4-mana 4/4. So you can put it in. You could put it in a Zooey deck. Things like Flame Imp, do a bunch of damage to yourself. With Priest, you could do it more defensively. I haven't quite figured out the way to use it in Priest in a way I think is good, but it slots really well into Warlock decks. So this card I could see just being slotted into Zoo. And also in Priest, if you could get it discounted, you could do something like this and then play Grave Runes of it. So it could work really well with things like Q Priest in the right synergy. So a lot of potential for this card, both for deck building and power level. I'm going to give it both a 4 on deck building and a 4 on power level. Things, like I said, much stronger in Warlock than it seems in Priest, but definitely a lot of potential and cool stuff to go on there. Cabal Acolyte, Taunt, Spell Burst, gain control of a random enemy with 2 or less attack. This is kind of a more meta card, but it's a good stat line. It's got Taunt. Though once you play this card, it's easy to play around. So it's your opponent's going to trade things and not play 2 attacks. So I don't think it's as strong as people say, but maybe if there's a meta that has like I said, like lots of eggs or something like that, and maybe if you have Priest, if you're running a bunch of small spells, you could make this work. But it's not a bad stat line, and and Cabal's Shadow Priest has seen play in certain metas, so I could definitely see this seeing play. It's more of a tech card in my opinion, so I see it a 3 on power level and a 2 on deck building. You do have to have some spell burst, so it does require some synergy, but nothing crazy there. Makazai Master Duelist. After you cast a spell, gain 1+1 spell damage. People are saying this is insane because you could do it with, Sorcerer's Apprentice, play like a bunch of Rays of Frost, and then do like Frostbolt and there's OTK. Huge amount of deck building potential here with combos, and it's a good stat line. So it seems good, but I think people are overestimating the ability to get out of this combo. But I like putting it in just a sort of a spell damage deck with a lot of maybe little spells. And it's because it's a 5-mana 3/8. Like, that's freaking hard to kill. You could just plop it down, your opponent can't kill it, and then you just do some stuff and remove some stuff. So I think people are overestimating this as a combo card, but underestimating this as a tempo card. So I'm going to give it a 3.5 on power level. Definitely a solid card, but a 4 on deck building. Lots of deck building potential there. I think people are a little overestimating this card a little bit, but I definitely think it's a good card. Ace Hunter Kreen. Your other characters are immune while attacking. So this reminds me of the old 3-mana 2/4. I can't remember the name, but it was Battle Cry. But this is just permanent. So you could do it with your whole board. So you have a whole board and you play it, and it could just remove something. So this card's like insanely strong. And it kind of just slots into every Hunter and Demon Hunter deck. I'm not sure if it's going to put it in every Hunter deck, but every Demon Hunter deck tempo is going to run it. So I think this card's incredibly good. It's like the only Demon Hunter card I thought is very strong, but I just think like every Demon Hunter deck is going to run this card. It's going to be another staple of Demon Hunter. So I'm going to give this a 5 on power level, but a 3 on deck building. I don't think it's as interesting deck building, but it does, like, you do have to have board a lot, so definitely some deck building synergy. So very powerful card, but I'm not convinced it's that interesting. Other than that, Ceremonial Maul, summon a student with taunt and stats equal to the spell's cost. This kind of reminds me of when I used to run the 4-mana Spirit of the Tiger, because it's very similar. You run it with this seems a lot better. So this is a Warrior and Paladin card. It seems a lot better in Paladin. Paladin has a lot more spells that we want to run. It's more the style. But it is a 3-mana 2/2 weapon. Not horrible as a weapon, but you really need the spell burst energy. So I'm going to give this, I could see this card not seeing play at all, but I could see it, especially because Spirit of the Tiger ended up being a card that people cut from even Paladin that I really liked, but ended up not being that strong. I could see this card being trashed, so, but it does have some really interesting deck building potential. So I'm going to give this also on 3, it doesn't seem to work that well. Unless you always have a 4-mana spell, so it seems to be more late game. So I'm going to give this a 2 on power level, but a 3 on deck building. Definitely some interesting stuff to do with it. Totem Goliath. Death Rattle, summon all 4 basic totems. Now this is a sticky minion. Kill the Weird Lord kind of summoning card. I forgot what it's called, but finally might see it today in Wild. But this card, you play this, it summons all the totems, and you go Bloodlust. So this card, it seems like it's very sticky. But I'm not, like, as a 5-mana 4/5 that summons with stuff, I'm not convinced it's like an auto play. So it definitely offers some really interesting, you get the heal, you run it maybe in Totem Shaman. Really interesting deck building potential. And, you could run this, you could do the Totem split with this card. So really, like I said, interesting death rattle. I'm not convinced it's strong as independently. So I'm going to give this a 2.5 on raw power level, but a 4 on deck building potential. Like a lot of interesting stuff you could do with this card. Glide. I know everyone's talking about this card. Shuffle your deck, hand in your deck, draw 4 cards, outcast your opponent does the same. And this card on the surface, like, oh, this is insane, but like how often, like it's kind of like the old divine favor from Paladin, but the reality is it has to be outcast to get your opponent does the same. And so it could work, I feel like, well in a Demon Hunter very low end curve deck. Maybe you sub this out for a Skull, but it's a thing of like well, you're always drawing a card, so you don't want to do it on 4. So you kind of, it can be awkward wise to like to do because you have to really empty your hand. And getting on the outcast, like it could definitely disrupt. So I think this card, I think people are saying this is insanely strong, and I don't think so. I don't think it's actually that strong. But I think it has a lot of potential. Maybe you build an anti-combo deck. Maybe you build it really low in curve. Really cool to have the building potential. But I think people are overestimating the strength of this card. Why? I think I'd much rather run Skull, which is 6 mana, draw 3, that reduces it, so you get all that mana back effectively. Where this is, I think the Outcast do the same. Like maybe I have an awkward turn. Like I can't run stuff with a 4. So 4 on deck building potential, but 2 on power level. I think people are really overestimating the power level of this card, but really cool card. So I hope this card is not a 2 in the end, but I could see it just not seeing any play at all. Philosophy. Copy the lowest card demon in your hand. Outcast, give it +1/+1. So this is, okay, copying demons. I don't think this card's that good. Outcast, like, this kind of reminds me of the old, the card for Warlock that would do the doubling imp. I can't remember its name. Give you leftmost card, +2/+2. Very similar for that, but I don't think it's that good. Do I really want to play this to get another flame imp? No, I want to play a 1-drop. And if it's Outcast, okay, but then even then, like, then I can play that and I can play this, or I could just play a 1-drop. Like, I would rather just do that. So I don't think this card's good. I'm gonna give it a 1 on power level, but maybe you can do some cool stuff with deck building potential. So I'm gonna give it 2 on deck building potential, but I don't think it's very good. Archwitch Willow. Summon a random demon for your hand and deck. Like with a Void Lord, this card would be insane. It's kind of brings out the big demon style. Like you run this and try and play it with the prime, and then try and summon all your demons. It's really cool. You could summon the 8 mana 5/7, but I'm not convinced. Like I've tried this stuff out before. It's a lot harder to do than that. Like realities, you want early demons, and it's a lot harder to make it as a powerful win condition. But it does remind me of Katrina. So I'm going to give this a 3 on power level and a 4 on deck building potential. In the right deck could be insanely good if the build around works. Similar to old, Death Rattle Hunter. So I like this card. I hope it's good, but it's really dependent on the deck building potential and the demons it's summoning. Like I said, if Void Lord was back in the meta, I would see this seeing play for sure. Really cool card, but I'm not convinced it's strong, but like going to be super strong. But it's definitely, I don't think a 2. I think it's a 3. So Outcast, look at your 3 cards in your opponent's hand, shuffle 1 in their deck. This card's bad. Like, okay, I can do some combo disruption when it's on the left side of my hand. Oh, and it's understated. So I don't see this seeing play. Oh, it's like a legendary. Like as a demon hunter, I want to be pushing pressure, and like, do I really want to be like trying to manipulate this Outcast? Am I going to be doing this late? Am I playing this in control demon hunter to remove 1 card from my opponent's hand? I don't think this is good. So I'm gonna give this a 1. I'm just giving 1s across the board. This card sucks. That's what I'm gonna say. This card sucks. It's more fun to give it a 1, right? Mage Hunter. Whenever this attacks minions, silence it. But like, if my opponent has a taunt, I can't do that, and it dies. Like a lot of times, like, do I really want it? So I think this card sucks as well. I would rather just run the 1 mana silence. So I'm gonna give this a 1 on both of this. A lot of the Demon Hunter cards I think suck this expansion, except for that one, the 2/4. Groundskeeper. If you're holding a spell that costs 5 or more, restore 5 health. This card's really, I think, really good. Works really naturally in Druid and Shaman. You get that heal synergy with already the 5 mana 3/5 Anubis Defender. So I could slots really nicely already into established Druid decks that want to be defensive. Great stat line. I'm going to give this a 4 on power level and a 4 deck building potential. It enables a lot of defensive decks and combo-y stuff. So really a good card. It's also because you got spells that cost 5 or more. It's nice doing this on 4 and then doing the 5 mana card on 5. So really nice card. I can see it slotting a lot of defense Druid decks. Turlough the Tenured. Rush. whenever this attacks a minion, send the defender's health attack to 3. Big stat line. Kind of reminds me of Natalie, but I think Natalie's better. I don't think this card's good. Like, why am I going to run this card? This card sucks. I just don't think this card's good. I'd rather run, like, and it comes in as a 3/9 always, where Natalie could come in even more. But also if you're trading on like lots of little things, I mean, if this card had taunt, it would be actually good, but it doesn't. So it's just like, I'm gonna play this, and then my opponent's gonna kill me. Like, if my opponent does have a 20/20 on board, okay, all right, I'll take this card in that situation. But yeah, this card's not good. Makes me worried about Paladin. So I'm gonna give this I'm gonna give it 1 on power level. I think it sucks, and I'm gonna give it 1 on synergy. Like, why am I gonna like this card sucks? Gift of the Luminance. This card, even though it's Priest and Paladin, I really like this card. Gives in a minion's Divine Shield, then summon one copy of it. Slots so well with the Q Priest. I think I'm gonna be trying this out with a version of Q Priest. You do Grave Runes on something, or you do it on Mind Flayer. Kajari works really well. I'm not sure how it would work in Paladin as well as naturally. Paladin doesn't have the same level of Death Rattle synergies to get the 1/1 value. That being said, if it does, so I think this card's definitely good. So I'm gonna in the right, but it does require the synergies. Like Q Priest wasn't a thing a while ago, so I'm gonna give this card a 3 on power level, but a 4 on deck building potential. I think it slots really nicely into Q Priest. I'm gonna be definitely testing this out with Q Priest. Adorable Infestation. Give a minion +1/+1. Summon a 1/1 cub. Add a cub to your hand. This card, so it's a really kind of interesting card. Like, it rewards you for having. It could be a 1-mana 1/1. It's not as good on 1, but I think you think of old like Firefly or that pirate card that summoned 2 pirates. So it's kind of efficient tempo, efficient value. Definitely some potential there, but I'm not sure. It just doesn't seem like a good 1-drop, but a lot of synergy. So it's really dependent on the synergy. I don't think it seems there's definitely some potential there. Like, you could run in small spell decks, you could run in token decks. There's definitely some potential with this card. So I'm gonna give this a 2.5 on power level, but a 4. Or I give it 3.5 on deck building potential. So definitely some good stuff to try with that. Gives you the 1/1, gives you the +1/+1, gives you 1/1 right away. So Lab Partner. Spell damage +1. 1-mana 1/3s are good. Spell damage is even better. This card's great. Like, I could see this being slotted into decks with very little synergy, but it also has huge potential for spell damage synergy. A lot of cards that have been printed with spell damage synergy. I'm gonna give this a 4 on power level and 4 on deck building potential. It's a really strong card. I could see every mage deck ever for now on running this card. Really good. Secret Passage. Replace your deck hand with your deck. 5 cards in your deck. Swap back next turn. I think people were saying this card's insane. It's insanely cool. I think when I was thinking, like, okay, if you're playing something like Gala Warlock, would you really want to play this early? Like, if you have all these things and you already have so much value, you usually don't need to play. But I think in the right deck, you play this in an aggressive rogue deck, and then you get to 6 or 7 mana and you're running out of stuff, and you play this and you play 4 cards. And it could be a whole turn, or you could use it to get an answer. Maybe you get an Eviscerate for lethal or a sap. So I don't think this is as strong as people are saying it is, but it has a lot of deck building potential. So I'm gonna give this a 4 on deck building potential, but only a 2.5 on power level. It definitely, you need to have the right synergies for this card to be working. I just don't think this is like an auto slot or anything like that. Runic Carvings. Summon 4/4 Trents. Overload to give them rush. We've seen the 5-mana card in Trent decks that summon 3 Trents, and this is 4. And you could give them rush if you're in a desperate spot. Seems like with the right, I don't think it's that strong, but with the right synergies, it could definitely be good. So I'm gonna give this a 2 on power level, but because it's still like, it's a little awkward to use Yeah, I'll give it 2.5, but I'm going to give it 3 on deck building. Devout Pupil. Cost 1 less for every spell you cast on a friendly character this game. This card seems insanely good. This is, it's like, think about, there's the 6 mana 4/5. I'm blanking on the name. It's often a really good power creation. Now, like, you can get this down. Imagine you just play 4 spells, and then you on turn 6, you have this on 2 mana, and you do this with Grave Roots. Like, there's a huge amount of potential with this card. You could just get it down for free. This card's really, really good. I'm gonna go ahead and give this a 5-star for power level, and a 4-star for deck building potential. Like, just so much you could do with this. Like, this card's really good. And even reality is, like, even if you only play 2 spells, you can play it on 4 as a 4 mana 4/5 Divine Shield Taunt. That's still really good. So a lot of potential. This card's really good. I could see tons of Priest and Paladin decks running this. It just slots really naturally to already established archetypes, even if they're not, the established archetypes aren't that strong. Marrow Slicer, 4 mana 4/2, shuffle 2 soul fragments in your deck. We haven't gone over a lot of the soul fragment stuff, but I don't think it's that strong with Demon Hunter. That being said, this is not, horrible. Like, this is kind of similar to True Silver Strength, but there's already good weapons. But like, reality is Demon Hunter does need a turn 4 play right now. It's kind of turns 4 and 5 in tempo. Demon Hunter are awkward, so this isn't that bad. I could see it being some play, so I'm gonna give this a 3 on power level, 3 on deck building potential. I don't think it's anything crazy, but I don't think it's that bad. We could see what it goes. So, Shadowlight Scholar, destroy a soul fragment in your deck, deal 3 damage. In the right synergy and the right cards, this card's really good. But when you don't have the soul fragment, it's 3 mana 3/4s tend to be pretty bad that don't do anything. So I'm gonna give this a 3 on power level, but a 4 on deck building potential. Definitely some really cool stuff you could do with the soul fragment. So Soul Shard, Lapidary, destroy a soul fragment in your deck to give your attack 5, your hero 5 attack this turn. And surface load that looks really good, but 1, you have the soul fragment in your deck. And 2, you compare it to something like a Gladebound Adept, which does 4 as a 6/4, and you don't need any synergy. I think that card's better, so would I rather run Gladebound around this? Then you can do this on 5, but you have to have the soul fragment in your deck. I don't know if that's as easy said than done. If you're running a draw deck, well, if you're drawing the soul fragments and you're running Skull, you might lose the discount. So I don't think this card is as good as that great. So I'm gonna give this card a 2 on power level, but a 3 on deck building potential. Destroy soul fragment in your deck to deal 3 damage to all their minions. This is definitely like good in like a control. Like, I could see there's like a controlling Demon Hunter dealing 3 damage to all the minions on turn 3 is certainly very strong. But you do have to have the soul fragment. This is definitely like I say a 3.5 on power level, but I'm not quite sure how to do it, but maybe you can build the right Demon Hunter deck. It does offer a lot of this, so I'm gonna give it 3 on deck building potential. School Spirits, deal 2 damage to all minions. So like kind of like Breath of the Infinite, shuffle 2 soul fragments in your deck. This is for Warlock. Like, think about Breath of the Infinite already sees play. I mean, there's already Dark Skies, so there's kind of that slot, but I could see this deals with the early Demon Hunter board. Seems like, and it has the soul fragment synergy. Breath of the Infinite already sees play in Priest, so I'm gonna give this a 4 on power level and a 4 on deck building potential. It literally offers a lot of new elements open. So Soul Shear, deal 3 damage to a minion, shuffle 2 soul fragments your deck. Still with the power level, it's kind of similar to other deal 3s. The effect is that, so opens a lot of deck building potential. I'm just give it 3 power level, 3 on deck building potential. Soulcologist Malakia. For each fragment in your deck, summon a 3/3 soul with Rush. It's a little bit slow, doesn't work with this, but like, if you have a bunch of soul fragments, this could be a huge swing card. So really cool deck building potential with the soul fragments, but I'm not sure if it's just objectively that strong. I'm going to give it a 3 on power level, but a 4 on deck building potential. And the last card for today, everyone's talking. Oh, let's go back. Sorry, Everyone's talking about this card. The Instructor Fireheart. Discover a spell that costs 1 or more. If you play it this turn, repeat the effect. This card is insane. This card is a 5 power level and fire and deck building. Like, you could do this with some sort of spell damage. Get it just. You could get Thunderbolt to the Thunderbolt, because if you play that spell, you repeat the effect. So you could just keep doing it over and over again. So you do it like on your turn 10, you just do a lethal. Like, this card's so good. And as a Volpera, it's like Volpera already sees play. This is just better than Volpera. Better stat line, all upside, no downside. This card's a 5. This card can carry the Shaman archetype. I don't think every Shaman deck is ever going to not run this card. And it's so much potential for OTKs. This card's insane. So this card is really, really good. It could be a finisher. Just so much potential for this card. This card's really good. So yeah, those are my initial evaluations. Hope you guys like them. And I'm going to be doing a card reveal analysis with Jay Alexander this Thursday. He's going to be, I think, putting out an announcement, but I will put a link hopefully in the description as soon as we have that. So hope you check in with that on Thursday. We're going to be streaming it, so hope to see you guys there. Hope you guys like the analysis, and have a great day.